Ah, the wheel. Where would we be without this rotating wonder? The wheel allows us to perform a myriad of tasks, everything from scooting to the shops on a Saturday afternoon to hurtling around a racecourse in high-performance vehicles. So indispensable are wheels to everyday life that many imagine the wheel was invented early in human histories and probably hewn out of stone. However, archaeology shows that for much of human history the wheel simply wasn't necessary and therefore wasn't invented. So just how old is this cyclatory shape? Well, some of the earliest evidence for wheels dates to around 3600 BC with the Cucuteni-Tripolye culture. Here it is thought that over time, sleds rolled on logs evolved into wheels on fixed axles. They also made wheels in the form of models. Here is a rollable bull. Around about the same time, in Mesopotamia, there are many pictographic references to wheels. In and around the great ziggurat city of archaeologists have found images of carts, seemingly with solid wooden wheels, attached to their axles with pegs. They probably would have been very useful for transportation of goods and also in combat. In order to find the oldest reliably dated wheel, you must travel to the capital of Slovenia, Ljubljana. Here is a reconstruction of that wooden marvel dating to around 3100 BC. Between 3000 and 2000 BC, on the Russian steppes and into Eastern Europe, there is much evidence of wheels in so-called Kurgan burial mounds. More than 200 examples of wooden carts with wooden wheels and axles have been uncovered from these burial mounds. They were obviously important, as the dead seemingly couldn't live without them. Around the same time, in what is now Turkmenistan, at the site of Altyn-depe, or the Golden Hill, we find yet again evidence that wheels were being used on models. And similarly, dating to around 2600 BC, in modern Pakistan, at the site of Mohenjo-daro, archaeologists unearthed yet more evidence that wheels were being used on models. We now approach a key point in the history of wheels. Around 2000 BC, the invention of spokes, lighter wheels, and thus chariots. Yet again, it seems Eastern Europe was the pioneer, and chariots spread across the world. It is thought a key element in their appeal is the ability to have fast-moving soldiers, in other words, a combat edge. Between 2000 and 1500 BC, we see chariots spread from the Carpathian Mountains to north of the Caspian Sea. Chariots, chariot burials, and thus wheels are found in Thracian burials in Bulgaria, and to the east, the Sintashta culture were burying chariots along with weapons of war. The ancient Greek city-states saw the arrival of the chariot, and thus the spoked wheel, around 1500 BC. Though, as elsewhere, it seems the wheel may have had a precedent with models, the chariot took on a role amongst the ancient Greeks in combat and ceremony. But it seems across the city-states, chariot racing was the most popular use of the wheel. The heritage of the wheel used on chariots in China was established in Luoyang around 2002. Dating to around 1200 BC, archaeologists uncovered several chariots, along with horses, but don't worry, it seems they weren't buried alive. As elsewhere, it seems such chariots were used for everything from leisure to warfare. Of course, I would be remiss if I did not mention the chariot technology which had spread south to Egypt. Pharaohs are often depicted on chariots, either racing or fending off whole armies single-handedly. Such chariots were extremely well constructed, strong, agile, and light. When it comes to wheels, Britain was a late developer, the earliest evidence for which comes from Flag Fen. This wooden wheel dates to the Bronze Age, around 1300 BC. However, around 1,000 years later, around 300 BC, in Wetwang in North Yorkshire, the wheel, and indeed the chariot, had taken centre stage. Buried with the chieftain, this was high-end Iron Age technology, composite wheels with iron rims for durability. Again, it seems that usage ranged from warfare to racing, ceremony to the grave. Soon after this, we see the rise of the Roman world, and their most famous of wheel-related contributions, that is, of course, roads. On the Appian Way in Italy, you can even see where wheels have worn tracks into the stone. It seems that Romans borrowed their chariot technology from the Etruscans, who loved to race them. And as with many things in the Roman world, they could not help but supersize the event. Now this is all well and good, I hear you say, but what about the Americas? What about the New World? Well, so far it seems the full-blown wheel was simply not invented. Some cultures, such as the Olmec, were technologically advanced, famous for their stone sculptures, for example, but the only use for wheels we have found seems to be on models or toys. A lack of large domestic animals possibly meant a cart was simply never developed. From solid pieces of wood to wheels we know and love, this has been far from a comprehensive history of the wheel. There are many other wheels I could have mentioned, including wheel pendants found amongst urn-field graves. Or quite literally, the world of wonders opened up by the invention of the potter's wheel. But we have at least seen something of the origins of a technology which has been so important to human history. So, whether you've taken your car to work, or maybe decided to ride in on your unicycle, be you hurtling along the track of a death-defying roller coaster, or coming in to land your prized plane, or even just carting round your shopping in the supermarket, take time to appreciate the wonderful wheels around you and the thousands of years which have gone into developing them. But remember that wheels are not a Stone Age invention, they're relatively new, and for far longer than we have had them, we lived quite happily without them.